I've been a security guard in my company for over 2 years now, but the work my company does is not your typical run-of-the-mill work. To put it simply, my company accepts jobs which no other security company will, including high-risk assignments that often result in death. Let me take it from the top. When I started working here, they had a very long one-on-one with me explaining all the potential dangers I'm facing. They also made me sign an NDA and a bunch of other papers stating that if something were to happen to me, the company is not responsible. They explained that the job is risky but well paid. I'd been jobless for a while, so jump at the opportunity regardless of the risks. Unlike most other companies though, they made me read through the entire NDA aloud to make sure that I'm aware of all the rules. Some of the things that I read there made me think initially that it's a joke, but then I see my superior was dead serious. My job would basically be to provide support to the guards at other posts via comms and patrol the perimeter I'm stationed at. Now my headquarters was located in an office building compound which had multiple companies renting the adjacent buildings. I would mostly work nights, with the occasional mornings, and the rules as follows. I was to do a full sweep of the compound and all offices, save for Building 4, the call centre. I was not to approach Building 4 under any circumstances, no matter what I hear from outside. Even if I saw someone inside from the windows, I do not engage them. When I ask for more details, they don't answer me, saying, if I value my life, then I must obey. Now people work a normal 9 to 5 in that building, and nothing seems to be wrong during the day. When I ask the employees about it during my morning shifts, so they don't want to know me. For Building 6, the designer company, the rules are even stranger. Here's what the building chief tells me. In Building 6, you may run into someone, a woman to be precise. She's going to try and start a conversation with you, and it's imperative to ignore her at all costs. She's going to try and talk to you, taunt you, but she'll never get in your way. It's an extremely important rule to remember, and I cannot stress this enough. If you see her in the building, don't run. Finish your sweep. Trust me, she'll know. Do the sweep as you normally do. Check every room and quietly exit. Ignore her the entire way. She's going to become increasingly agitated and violent. Tell you something's behind you. Ignore her, unless you want to end up like the last guard, okay? You'll be fine. Now I've since encountered the woman, and it was a grueling and agonizing experience I don't want to speak about. Another rule I had to remember was not to open the gate between the hours of 22 and 07. The chief said that under no circumstances am I to open the gate. Even if the next guard comes 5 minutes earlier to relieve my duty, it remains shut. That brings me to this experience I had. It was about 6 months after I started working and the sun's already up. I heard knocking on the gate and went out. I saw through the gate the silhouette of my co-worker. "Hey, mind opening the gate," he said. As I approach and put my keys into the hole, my phone starts ringing. I answer it without looking, but when I heard the voice, my blood froze. It's my co-worker. "Hey man, I'm gonna be 30 minutes late today, sorry," and hung up. I realise it's 6:50 AM. I stare at the silhouette on the other side of the gate, who suddenly starts banging on the door, demanding to be let in, stating he lost his cell phone and he was the real co-worker. I now retreat to the guardhouse and wait for what feels like forever, when this banging suddenly starts on the door, demanding to be let in, stating that he lost his cell phone and he was a real co-worker. I retreat to the guardhouse and wait for what seems like forever until it stops. In reality, it only lasted until 7 AM. Those were all the rules I had to follow on my own post, and most of the time it's uneventful. However, I have heard stories from other co-workers. Since I'm in contact with guards at other posts, one of them told me his story. He worked as a guard in a residential building, and one night an old man who lived there called him to come to his apartment. He didn't explain what's wrong, just said go there, so he did. When he reached the apartment, his wife was crying, stating that her husband's dead. The guard tried convincing her that her man was very much alive and had in fact brought him there, but when he turned around, the old man's gone. It was then that he saw the old man's dead body in the chair, near his sobbing wife. He quit the same night. Another creepy thing that happened was on the farmstead which our company has guards on. A guy by the name of Jeff who worked there told me about his own experience which made him run away from his post in the middle of the night. So apparently, the farm was empty at that time since it needed some more staff built first. But his duty was to basically patrol circles around the farm, making sure there's no squatters or vandals. So one night, as he's walking around, he hears someone calling his name in a playful tone. He dismisses it as his imagination at first, but when it reoccurs, he asks who's there, demanding they put their hands in the air. Now I haven't seen this, so I can't guarantee anything, but Jeff says that all of a sudden, a man suddenly rises from the crops, and they just reach his waist, which is technically impossible, because the crops themselves are taller than Jeff, who's pretty tall. But the man grins at Jeff and continues calling his name playfully, as though he's still hiding from him. Needless to say, Jeff didn't exactly stick around to see what the fuss was about. When he reports it to HQ, they said there's sightings of him in the past, always calling out names, but never really doing much harmful. The final thing I'll share with you here is my experience when I was stationed at a post hospital for a month. It was a private clinic. Now my job was basically to monitor the camera feed. Camera 3 was cut off, though I have no idea why. I asked them and they told me to keep it that way and to never turn it on again. They also said that from time to time I may see a person on feed which covered the outside of the security office, and that he would just be standing there facing the door. I was to remain in my office, whatever happened, and never glance at the door. He would usually disappear after 30 minutes or so. Patrolling was strictly forbidden between 3 to 6 AM. Money is one of the reasons I haven't quit so far, and the dangers aren't that bad if you get used to it and know what you're doing. And plus getting stationed at different posts keeps this job adventurous and dynamic. But I still have no explanation to any of these things to this day. I just pray I'm not clumsy enough to ever find out what's the worst that can come of them. I guess you'll never hear from me if that happens anyway.
There's someone standing at the foot of my bed. Every night for the past week, as my eyelids grow heavy and I slip into unconsciousness, he comes out, his hands grasping the metal railing, rising 1 inch at a time. He peeks out his head first, black and featureless, a pair of cobalt blue eyes set high up where his eyebrows should be. Then out comes his shoulders, and his chest, until he's fully upright. He looks like a store mannequin, sexless, starved. I know I'm sleeping, but my eyes are open and I see him. But I can't bring myself to talk to him or reach out to him. The gaunt man just stands there, his eyes transfixed to mine, his breathing shallow and ragged. On Monday, the gaunt man reached out a thin hand with long fingers and pulls back the sheets covering my legs. He drags his fingers across my heels or up the soles of my feet, leaving long trails of red that stain my sheets. It felt like a nightmare, the kind you can't wake yourself out of. Tuesday, I caught a glimpse of him in my bedroom mirror. His back was the same as his front. His cobalt blue eyes found mine in the dark room and just watched me as I slept. He dragged his fingers across my legs all the way down to my toenails, scratching them. There's always pain in the morning. There's blood on the sheets, scabs on my legs. He loves mirrors. I know this. He likes to look at himself. When he comes out from under the bed. Wednesday, he just stood and stared at his own reflection, as if he were in love with it. His front, though. His front stayed fixed at me. Thursday, his eyes moved, shifted across his face until they were at just the right place. When this was done, he crawled into the bed beneath the covers and lay beside me. The way he felt when my hand brushed his skin, it made me think of rotten shellfish in a freezer drawer. Friday morning he was gone. My feet were a bloody mess. Just trying to stand up felt like a dozen needles running through the soles of my feet. I saw him in the puddle I made on the floor. Don't ask me how I could tell, but he looked like he was smiling. I went to see a doctor about it. He sent me to see a shrink. I've showered 3 times already, but I still smell like rotten shellfish. Friday night, he was leaning over me as I slept. He looks proper now, bit round in the waist, same as me. Saturday morning, I missed the appointment with the shrink. It's hard to type now that he's in my monitor's reflection. He's dragging his fingers across the back of my hands, up my arms, all the way to my shoulders. I can't see the letters that well for the blood. My eyes are all wrong. He's fading now, but from the creaking of the floorboards in the next room, I know he's in the bed. Don't ask me how I know this, but it's his bed now. He'll be in my rearview mirror. Come Monday, I'll be the one standing behind him as he looks at his reflection in the bathroom stalls. I look at my reflection. My eyes are cobalt blue.
Now this is a personal family story that's never been shared before, but I can't keep it in, it's just too crazy. I mean, so there's been this doll that's been in our family for apparently hundreds of years, but I don't believe that. The thing's got to have been about 100 years old. Now apparently, that doll is haunted by some of the natives that used to live on the land that my family owns. Get this, the story of how they found it is that my grandpa woke up in the night with this urge just to go digging. Never had anything like it before. Literally in the middle of the night, grabs his shovel, and he says that there was almost a voice guiding him there, but it wasn't speaking to him, if that makes sense. He just knew what it meant. So he grabs his shovel and heads out in the dark, with only the moonlight guiding him and the voice. He starts digging away. My nan thinks he's gone crazy. However, he eventually strikes something. we can then see that he struck a box, and what's inside the box, you guessed it, the doll. Now apparently, when he started looking at the doll, he realised something was wrong with it, and immediately dropped it. He ran inside and went to bed again, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it was all a dream. My nan was furious at him for doing so, being a very strong believer in the paranormal. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't a dream, and he woke up the next day with it sitting in the living room. Both of my grandparents were sure that each other had put it there, and didn't say anything about it. Now that's where I come into the story. Apparently, I would wake up when I slept round there, and I would complain of it screaming at me whenever I made eye contact with it. What's worse is my other siblings also reported the same thing, but for some reason my grandpa had an urge that he had to protect it and couldn't get rid of it. That all changed, however, one day when my mum was having tea with them in the living room, when she caught eye contact with the doll, and she heard the screaming too. It's like a faint voice in the back of your head that slowly gets louder. That was it. She's had enough of it messing with her children, and my grandpa, for some godforsaken reason, protecting it. She heads outside with simply a lighter and some sticks. She throws it onto a fire and burns it. She then buried the ashes, and years later we sold the home. Now I don't know if that thing's still there, or whether it's actually returned again to haunt the new owners of the home. I know one thing though, I'm glad that my mum was brave enough to deal with it, and that I don't ever have to see that godforsaken doll again or hear the screaming. So by this point, everyone is in no doubt to be fully aware of the Area 51 memes and all the hubbub surrounding them. Apparently, over 1 million people are set to storm the perimeter on September 20th of this year. Should be interesting, but let's be honest for a second. I doubt it's gonna happen. Even if we did, even if by some ridiculous miracle they managed to overwhelm the most powerful military on Earth and infiltrate a top secret base, I don't think they'd be exactly thrilled with the results. I'll just come right out and say I guess Area 51's a red herring. It's a distraction, and pretty much always has been. Nothing out there but sand, reclusive scientists and an old lake. I mean, think about it. If Area 51 is one of the most top secret and covert blacklists in the world, how does everyone know about it? How secret can it be if everyone knows the secret? I mean, for frick's sake, even Obama acknowledges its existence. That's the whole point of it. They want you distracted so you don't look for the others. But why take my word for it? Who am I? I'm just some pleb on the internet that decided to cash in on a trend for some clout perhaps, yeah. But no. That may be who I am now, but I was once a person of particular interest to the United States government. Most people know me as Mr. Blue. It's not my real name, but it's much easier to pronounce. I used to be a pilot. I did that for many years, and I loved every second of it. I tell ya, there's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. Yeah, you might crap yourself a little, but hey, that's part of the experience, really. Now, unfortunately, the type of work I did is above the top secret, and for all of our safeties, I cannot go into any more detail of who I am or what I did. One day, however, I was out on a classified reconnaissance mission in a certain area I should not have been. Now, I'll apologise here for any vague details of certain things, but you gotta understand, The things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. I mean, they'd kill me 10 times over for uttering a word of it. But anyway, the mission's going as planned, when suddenly my instruments start going haywire. Air pressure inside the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges start going crazy. Everything. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Next thing I know, I see a bright light soar past me at an ungodly speed. The shockwave it produced is so violent that it shredded the whole of my craft in a split second. So I went from casually flying along to suddenly regaining consciousness as I plummeted headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my chute before I splattered, but as I touched down, I almost wished I hadn't. There I was met by an entourage of at least 24 men in winter camo suits and masks. They're all pointing weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognise as English. I do my best to calm down and appear unthreatening, but that didn't stop them from wrenching me into a pair of handcuffs and hauling me onto their APCs. They began to drive away, and the real severity of the situation hit me. I was not going to be saved. The people I worked for had never said it, but I always known that if you're captured, you're on your own. With that in mind, I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started the interrogation. It may seem cowardly, but I'm not about to be tortured brutally from a former ally. Yeah, the government says that they don't torture people, but that's what they say. So I told them about who I worked for, what my mission was, why I grew up, all that jazz. It was all fabricated, but they took the bait regardless, thanks to their severe distrust of the Russians at the time. But they were actually pretty cool after that. I mean, they wouldn't leave me in their custody alone, but it was better I was alive than dead for them. They then transported me away from my initial interrogation place into a secure facility nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time. I can now hear rumbling of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping. I could tell they've taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after, I stepped off the elevator and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face, a thick black beard and eyes that looked etched onto concrete. He wore a black suit, with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I don't recognise. He stepped in front of everyone, outstretched his arms while staring at me. "Welcome to your new home." An ever so slight grin stretches across his face as he says it. I glanced down the dismay grey hallways which seemed stretched out further than I could ever imagine in multiple directions. They led me down some hall on the right, past dozens of locked corridors, and the rooms before ushering me into a cell. My handcuffs were removed soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man who had welcomed me to the facility then approaches the window, pushing the intercom. "Welcome to the corporation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there's any reason why our time spent together should be unfriendly. I apologize for this, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution we must take." And I nod at him. "Wonderful. We'll see you for dinner soon. If you require anything, just please notify one of the guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strolled down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility, which I eventually came to know as FEZ. I don't think it's an official name, but I heard several personnel at the base refer to that by the acronym over the years. I still don't know what it was for. The best I can come up with is Fortified Experimental Zone. It makes the most sense. All things considered, At first it wasn't actually too bad. The staff are nice, the food is great, and there's plenty of things to see around the base. Now they interviewed me probably 100 times after, and were especially interested in the craft I was piloting. The craft in question was one of our new technologies, but unfortunately it was blew to smithereens by the light. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon we might even be considered friends. I became especially close with one of the scientists named Kevin. Kevin was a smart, comical guy and had quite a lot of things explained to me. He and I would spend countless hours talking. He was my only glimpse into what was happening on the outside world. He'd bring in books and movies for us to enjoy together. He'd keep me updated on everything. And over the next 30 years, we developed a close friendship that I always treasure. I must have displayed some kind of intellectual potential, because they eventually started asking for my input on various curiosities stationed throughout the base. They only did it because I'd sworn to them complete loyalty that I'd never be allowed to leave the base anyway. The base itself is colossal. They always blindfolded me during transports by any location, but one time I caught a glimpse of the buttons in the elevator. There had to be at least 50 of them. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown blocks. There were guard posts at every cell. I heard some very strange noises emanating around me as we transversed the halls. I thought for sure that they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and prepared myself for the according howls of unseen things through the halls. Now the lead scientist rolled back a two-way mirror, and my heart frozen with anticipation. In the cell block in front of us, there's nothing more than a human girl in a grey jumpsuit. She's maybe 5 years old or so, but nothing out of the ordinary. I told the doctor what's going on, and he raises his eyebrows before pressing a button, and I heard the sound of a gas seep into the room. A few tense seconds passed, when the girl suddenly shrieked a little. Her head tilted back, and I saw jagged, needle-like teeth emerge from her mouth. Her jet black eyes then lurched towards us, and she lunges at the window. She struck it hard and fell into the ground, snarling and hissing like some terrible beast. You ever seen anything like that? All I can do is shake my head. I've never seen anything like it before. They found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating him, and she appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly feel like vomiting, but I said nothing. I only stared back at the unusually gruesome little girl. What the hell is she? Unfortunately, I was never told anything else about her. I doubt the personnel knew much anyways. They came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. A giant brownish orange-haired primate that walked upright and seemed to respond to facial movements. A humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared cameras. A golden chest that would instantly kill anything that touched it, and a 10-foot tall creature wrapped in vines that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into the environment with perfect camo. There's a monstrous fish, at least 80 feet in length, frozen in nitrogen. Various apparent creatures that I'm guessing are the results of relentless genetic tempering. I've never seen anything like it. All of the monsteries housed there, and the secrets buried in their possession. They also asked for my advice on certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. They tell me that For decades there had been hundreds of unsolved cases of human disappearances that defied all explanations. Young children were found on cliff edges that they could not have reached, while old and frail people would be discovered dozens of miles away from where they started only hours later. Many not found though. I could almost see the fear from their eyes as they relay case after case of recordings and other things. And it was clear, although not said, that they have no idea what the cause is. Unfortunately, neither do I, as it was the first time I'd ever heard of the bizarre phenomenon. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel worse or not. Throughout the years there, I had always found one particular thing weird. After all the weird and terrifying things they showed me, there's never a mention of extraterrestrials. That's why everyone thinks these black site facilities are there, but nobody mentioned it. That made me smile a bit when I thought about it, because they had no idea how close they were. The closest thing they had was this weird tentacle creature with a rigid set of teeth in its mouth, almost an eel, but possessed for weird eyes in a ring around its head. You'd think it'd live in the water, but it didn't. That was what threw me off about it. It slithered around the ground in a very swift and very unsettling motion. They said its DNA resembled nothing like anything they've ever seen before, much like RNA, hence the reason they believed. But we're not certain of where it come from. Kevin and I got talking back in his quarters one night as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to chat as though we're friends late into the night. He tells me about himself and things that he's never mentioned before. He showed me his wife and his son that had been taken from him. Kevin admitted that his son died in a car crash years back, and his wife unfortunately died of cancer years later. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for him some 30 years later. Kevin was in his early 50s, but you'd never know it with the enthusiasm in his voice. It was during the conversation Kevin ended up mentioning something I find interesting. He told me that he believed that if an alien species existed, they're advanced enough to traverse a galactic canopy and reach Earth. Then obviously they're going to be quite intelligent also. He said he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday where aliens come to destroy us. He thought they'd be more subtle than that. Think about it. You find some intelligent creatures which present almost no threat to you, and the first thing you're going to do is try and kill it? That'd be a waste, no. And no species that fancies themselves as an advanced being would be so brash. At least I hope they wouldn't. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look mixed with a unique intrigue that glistened in his grey eyes. Even if they thought we were destroying our own planet or something, why do they care? They're trillions of miles away, and there's trillions of other planets in our Milky Way alone. They could pick off any one of them if they wanted resources. I chuckled to myself, almost foreseeing where the conversation's heading. It's not the planets they're after, I replied. Kevin snapped and pointed his finger at me and his face lights up. Exactly. They'd want to study us, learn about us how we do other things. Kevin's hand moves erratically now. They'd probably learn about us, then we'd learn more about ourselves too. I mean, granted, they'd have to be more intelligent. They could learn up close, understand how we work. No need for bloodshed when they could simply, inconspicuously integrate into human culture. They have no doubt mastered the art of altering their biology to disguise themselves. I mean, that's nothing when compared to the tech they use here, you know. He paused from his entranced monologue and wiped off the stream from his glasses. I just sit back, intent to let him continue. As I found it fascinating that he could know so much. Aliens, they're not warlords, they're poets, architects, authors, musicians, beings that wish to create. It is the ultimate calling from the entity so powerful. Kevin took a deep breath and revealed his own explanation. His speech had turned a bit slurred. His eyes are somewhat lazily floating. He then met his eyes in a look that I'd never seen him give before. It was as though he seemed to have lost all sense of formality and ready to propose a question which he had long wanted to ask. "You're not really from Russia, are you?" The sudden accusation caught me off guard. I don't know what to say. You had everyone fooled. I mean, I was too for the longest time. You had a suitable backstory, authentic accent, and the alias you gave us checked out. He paused and clasped his hands in front of him. You look so authentic too, but there was one thing you missed. One thing you can't fake. That night your craft was shot down. What were you doing here, Kevin? And I maintained a prolonged lock of eye contact before I finally responded. Well, reconnaissance. And for the first time in decades, I dropped the Russian accent. It was clear that there was no longer any reason to lie to my friend. And what did you see, Kevin? Staring into my eyes. Beauty, poetry, creatures like us. Kevin just stared at me for the longest time, as though he was there weighing my soul in his mind. I wondered what he planned. Eventually he smiled and rose to make his way to the cell door. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a black steel pistol with a long snout. "Mr. Blue, do you want to go home?" I nodded after pausing for a moment. "I hope your allies can forgive us." Without another word, he flashed his security badge on the locks on the doorway. He mentioned for me to rise and follow, so I do. Kevin glanced back and forth down the hallway, but due to the late hour, no one's around. He and I sprinted down the corridor and onwards to one of the security booths. He flashes his badge as I head out of sight. He entered his room and I heard noises, like a brief scuffle before two bright flashes ended it. Kevin now re-emerges with wild eyes, beckoning to me to follow. He and I dash down the hallway and reach a massive mineshaft elevator soon after. Now finally, for the first time, I enter without a blindfold. Kevin punches in the security code and powers it up. Security system will be down for a good half hour, but automated distress beacons have already been activated, and that gives us about 8 minutes. Kevin drops the clip from his pistol, popping in a fresh one. I see speckles of blood on his eyes. He's in a frenzy state. "Here, take this." He reaches out his hand and held something which I haven't seen in decades. The old radio from my craft. I took it. We meet eyes at the door to the elevator. It was back to running after that, but after a few minutes of it, we've reached an underground parking facility. Kevin unlocks a nearby vehicle, and the two of us hopped in as he fires it up. The engine roars to life. Kevin and I accelerate through. A moment later, we exit the facility. God, and I see my first vision of the night sky in over 4 decades. There were men stationed at the perimeter gates attempting to stop us, but he don't even flinch. He crashes right through the fence on the perimeter, causing multiple lights to activate in our wake. I hear sirens now and the silhouettes of people dashing. There's a suit in the back, put it on. I do so, without question, and fitting the snug polyester garment. I covered every square inch of my neck around that thing, and it feels incredibly comfortable. There's a dial on your right side. You can use it to mask your body heat. They're gonna be after you. He tossed a map into my lap and continued barking instructions. You can contact your friends on that radio, right? His eyes flashed to me as he slid onto the main road and away from the compound. Yeah, Kevin nodded. Make your way north. They won't be expecting that. There's a river up there about 30 miles away from the forest. Once you find it, head east until you find a small town. Ask the guy at the post office for Mr. Wyatt. He's a friend of mine who's agreed to help you. He'll take it from there. I tried to digest the flow of information as best as I can to remain confident. It had all happened so suddenly. I stashed you some MREs in that bag. Should last you a good couple of weeks. Kevin then swerved around the corner to reorientate us onto a new dark road. I have an influx of adrenaline. A sudden thought occurred to me. What's gonna happen to you though? Kevin didn't seem to want to acknowledge the question. Forget about it. Just get back to your own people, okay? Behind us is a flurry of lights, suddenly ascending into the night sky. The whirly sound of rotary blades is all I can hear. Ah, I had hoped that I could get you a bit further than this. He suddenly slams on the brakes. My head lurches forward and the car spun back and forth along an icy road. Here, take this too. Handing over the long-barreled pistol. I hesitantly take it. Then our eyes meet for one final time. This is where we say goodbye, Mr. Blue. Why? Why are you doing this for me? Kevin lets out a sigh, staying silent for a moment, and only when the sounds of approaching engines grew louder, he says, You don't belong here. You don't belong in a cage. I don't know where you come from, but I want you to see your loved ones again. I know I can't. His eyes begin to water as he jolted his neck before looking at me one final time. I hope you don't think of us as captors or kidnappers. I hope you see us as you see yourself. I hope you can just understand. A single tear then rolled down his cheeks, and I put my hand on his shoulder. I always have, and I always will. Thank you, Kevin. I held out my hand, and he grabbed it tight as we shared one final moment before I venture into the blizzard. The journey from then on was long and arduous, with me spending weeks trudging through snow and frozen forests. Hounds, men, machines pursue me for days, but somehow I elude them. The terrain is truly brutal, unrelenting, but eventually I managed to find the river which Kevin has mentioned to me. By this point, all of my pursuers had long gone silent, and I followed the river and found the town, and soon after, the man known as Mr. Wyatt. He was a kind man, gladly inviting me into his house to avoid the agents. It is there that I've been ever since, awaiting Ali's arrival. They were stunned to hear me again, but not as stunned as I was to find out the radio still works. They weren't entirely sure whether they could trust me anymore, but I didn't give them a choice. I threatened to go public and expose them to the world, and they finally agree, but mention it's months before they can reach me. I expect as much, and thankfully Mr. Wyatt allowed me to stay with him and wait for their arrival. I found out soon that my dear friend Kevin, to who I owe my life and freedom, has been found deceased. The authorities ruled it a suicide, gunshot wounds around the back of the head, but obviously I had my doubts. It truly broke me to learn about one of my true friend's demises, but I knew it was what he expected. I like to think that this is why he chose to do it, and furthermore, it is the reason I'm posting here now. Kevin's legacy deserves to live on, and this is the only way I know how to do it. And with that, we have come full circle to this message you're reading right now to address the original topic. Area 51 is indeed a reuse. Kevin had a lot of power in his previous role and told me about all the operations. The real prize is FEZ, my former prison, somewhere in Alaska, buried beneath mountains of snow. Kevin was a smart, brilliant man. If you've ever managed to make it this far, then I'd like you to think that you're someone like him, brave, curious, with an almost innate sense of wonder that cannot be satisfied. It is my hope that Kevin's ideas will live on through you. My allies would never approve of the message, but that's not the point. The truth is something that all sentient beings should be allowed to perceive, despite how unpleasant it may be. It was Kevin's belief that the beings he knows as aliens are already there, that instead of murdering humans, as is often portrayed in stories, they would blend in, take keen interest in human culture and society, write books and poetry in the hopes of connecting to something truly extraordinary. If Kevin is right, then maybe one day you even stumble upon such a story yourself. Maybe you'll think that it's nothing more than a work of fiction either. Maybe the author said theoretical story would seem like nothing more than your run-of-the-mill internet user. He probably wouldn't come right out and say it, because that would be entirely too corny. He would probably just leave you the pieces and hope you can put them together. Maybe you are truly like Kevin, drawn to mystery and prepared to entertain the fantastic. Maybe you'll dismiss the implications of the words before you because you don't dare believe in something so outlandish. Because in the end, truth is not the problem, belief is. Maybe someone will understand who, or more importantly, what I really am. Maybe it will be you. Either way, I've been away for a very long time. It's time for me to go home now. Thank you, Kevin. I will always uphold our agreement. My dad and I went on a hiking trip a few days ago. My dad is a waterfall fanatic. He wants to see as many as possible. So he and I are hiking along a very pretty trail. We're hiking along a river. It's flowing nicely. There's mountains all around us. The trail is weaving around big, beautiful boulders. I'm hiking at most 30 feet ahead of him, looking for a spot to sit down and have picnic lunch on. And as I round a blind curve in the trail, I just freeze. Sitting on a stump maybe 10 feet off to the right is a guy. But he's wearing one of those colourful badger hoodies. With the hoodie pulled up, he's wearing a Halloween style bunny mask. He sees me and stands up right after my dad rounds a corner. We are all three sizing each other up in silence, and my dad addresses him. "What's up, buddy?" The masked man then tips his head as though he's deciding what to do with us. He then finally speaks, saying, "Oh, not much. You aren't the guys I'm waiting for. You have a good day." And then he turns and jogs off quickly. Strapped on his lower back is a large hunting knife and a pistol. We lose sight of him pretty quick. We hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day, and we'd been there for almost 4 hours. Needless to say, we leave the waterfall for another day and turn quick. Once we're off the trail, we report it to the local forest service and police, but they say they can't do much aside from keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. Now, the guy had no backpack or water or anything, which makes me think that he either had it stashed somewhere or was camping nearby. I hate to admit it, but I desperately wanted to ask the guy who he was looking for and why. Let me start by saying that I love camping. Anytime my friends and I come home from college, we loaded up our cooler with beer, grab some gear and go screw around outside. Unfortunately, when I was actually at school, none of my sorority sisters or friends ever wanted to go with me, so I often suffer withdrawals from camping. One day, the weather was way too nice to waste, so I grabbed my gear, hopped in my car I borrowed from a buddy and drove to a spot that's secluded yet within safety of civilization if I need to get help. Camping also creeps me out though, but that feeling is always outweighed by the joy of it. So I make a little camp and a fire going. I hadn't brought all that much, but I'm enjoying myself reading and looking around the area, that sort of thing. I got the feeling that I'm being watched and stopped dead in my tracks. I hear a twig crunch over to my right, but see a doe vault from 100 feet or so in front of me. I laughed at myself and went back to camping. I just kept freaking myself out though, hearing sounds just outside of the ring of light cast by the fire. I always get inside my head, so I shrugged it off and kept whistling and just enjoying myself. Around 1, I decided to get into my tent and snuff out the lantern. I'd been slamming beers in the most unladylike fashion and smoking cheap cigars until I passed out. It's around 2 AM. I hear footsteps. They sound pretty light and sort of timid. I think to myself that it's a deer or some animal, maybe a raccoon, but I'm on guard. About 30 minutes of sleeping with one eye open later, and I hear a rubbing sound and the tent fabric being pushed in a bit. I don't know what to do. I'm paralyzed with fear. I desperately wanted to go and get the knife and stab this person, but I think maybe it's one of my buddies messing with me. Suddenly, it stopped. I was starting to feel more secure because daylight's coming in about 2 or 3 hours, but I'm sure as hell not gonna sleep. All of a sudden, it's about 4 o'clock. I realise I should have my boots on in case anything were to happen. After having stayed up and keeping alert for a little longer, my friend's car alarm goes screaming. I sprint out of the tent. I got about 2 steps out before something grabs me around the mouth. I open my mouth to scream, but instead, the person stops me. I've heard that people can perform insane feats of strength with adrenaline rush. In my case, I just clamped down. His finger popped off almost. He screamed and pulled his hand away. He took off, running down the hill and into the opposite direction. I take off. I must have looked ridiculous, but I didn't care. I quickly make it into the car and speed it out of there, calling up my friends, telling them what's happened and the police, and get some real clothing. When the cops get there, they checked it out. The cops went out with a light. They brought me back some of my things that I left there. But what made me most scared is that right next to the tent was a gas can, and lighter fluid had been poured around my tent. The kicker is, they never caught the guy. So somewhere out there is some crazy guy that's looking to make fires in tents with people in them. Growing up, every summer in July and August, my family would get together and camp out for 2 weeks at the White Lake State Park in Tamworth, NH. Some of my best childhood memories were made there, with rollerblading, Nerf gun wars, etc. Now when I was around my late teens, my family stopped gathering together to camp out after my grandpa passed away. One of the last years I was there, this one particular memory always stuck with me. A little over 10 years ago, I was 16 years old. It was around 10 PM at night when I noticed I had a missed call on my cheap little track phone. My family was sitting around the campfire cooking s'mores and sharing some laughs, so I decided to go and get some privacy to return the call. I then took a long narrow trail that winds in between other campsites that, at the end, leads up to the bathroom. I wasn't going up to the bathroom. I just wanted to find an empty campsite and sit at a picnic table to make my call. There was plenty of those, since this whole side of the campground was where I'm going and it's vacant. There was no other campers nearby in that area. It was quiet and dark, so I chose a campsite. I sit down at a table. There's lights from a distance that light up from behind the top of the hill behind me, illuminating my surroundings just a bit. I called my friend and was carrying on a conversation for around 20 minutes. As I'm sitting there, staring straight ahead, I see the silhouette coming down from the road in front of me. The figure is coming towards my direction, where all the empty campsites are. I can see it's a person. It's not that unusual to see people strolling through the campsite for a night walk. The people I see usually have flashlights, so this person doesn't, but I'm not creeped out, just curious. As the person gets closer, I can see the outline better now, and it's a man. I also noticed his pace slows down. I kept my eyes fixated on him as I continue conversing on my cell phone. A minute or two passes by now, and now he stopped moving. He's just standing there in the road looking straight into the campsite where I'm at. Now I don't know if he can see me. Oh wait, he can now. He's staring at me. I step back. He was a little heavy and tall. I can make out he's wearing a jacket. I can't see many facial features, but I would guess that I was staring at a man in his late 40s or 50s. Alarm bells are going off in my head now. My mind has turned to mush at this point and I'm frozen. I was no longer listening to what my friend is saying. I just stare off at this guy. He starts moving now. He was tiptoeing towards me, very carefully, like he didn't want to make a sound. He put one foot in front of the other, leaned forward in a slight hunch form. It looked as though he was charging towards me. In that moment, I snapped out of my mind-mushy frozen state and leaped forward off the picnic table and began running through the campsite back towards the trail. Thud, thud, thud. I can hear him getting closer now, leaves scuffling, heavy yet fast footsteps. Footsteps were getting louder and closer. I made it back to that narrow trail. Once he gets close to whereabout I was, I heard the sound of twigs snapping and the sound of someone annoyed that they've tripped or hurt themselves. Most likely he wasn't familiar with the trail like I was. Whatever the reason it was, it causes him to just stop. I don't stop looking back. I just keep running and running until finally I make it back to my family's campsite. When I got back there, they're still having laughs and smiles by the campfire. I break down crying and I'm trembling. I explain what happened, and my aunt woke up and said, "Oh God." He probably thought that he was someone he knew and was doing it as a joke, dismissing me. My cousin saying, "Yeah, he probably stopped running after he realised he didn't know you, idiot." I wish I was taken seriously, but other than that one thing happening, there was no reason for them to really be afraid. My experience makes me think twice about going alone camping now. I always carry pepper spray with me too, and an alarm. I hope I never see that guy again. Now, while I was growing up, my family would visit the same lake every year for every summer weekend. As we got older, we would visit a large rock we called the Cliffs and jump off it. The rock's only about 15 feet tall at the highest point. For the water, that's really deep. When we got older, we would jump in and try and touch the bottom, but we never could. When my brother and I were in our teens, we took our kayaks to the cliff's edge to jump on our own. We jump off several times. We then find a nice cold spot at the very top of the cliffs and chill there for a bit. As we're sitting there, we notice a white shape in the water, floating towards the surface. It's the letter H. Eventually, it sank back into the water and we lose sight. Before we can look away or even say anything else, another shape was floating upwards, the letter E. Eventually, it too sank below, but it was followed by two more letters, L, P. We didn't jump in after that. We stood up without saying a word and left. We never mentioned it to anyone, and I forgot it even happened. Several years ago, I was working as a camp counselor and told this story as a ghost story. I'd almost forgotten about it and texted my brother to see if I hadn't made it up completely. I asked him if he remembered the time we jumped off the cliffs and saw something in the water. He said yes. I asked him what it was and he too said it spelled out help. One of my friends always has these get-rich-quick schemes or shady ways of making money on the side. Now, in one of his more brilliant moves, he decides that he's going to rent a house out near the country line to host illegal poker games in. Yep. Anyway, on this property is probably 4 or 5 acres with this tiny rundown church about 1,000 yards away on the side. And there's a redneck guy who lives on the side in a trailer probably a quarter of a mile or so down the road. However, the property backs up to the woods, and since it's always cheaper than the range, and I and a third friend ask our renter friend if we can go shoot some guns on the property. He obliges us, and we head out there on a Saturday afternoon and find a nice berm at the tree line to shoot into. Now we're just shooting paper targets with pistols, so we're not that far back, and don't need that much room to do so. After a few magazines, we decide to venture deep into the woods to see just how far the property goes. Now we get down to the bottom of the hill and see fluorescent ribbons that the server ties to the trees to mark property lines. we realised that the property's way bigger than we ever thought before. We're already 200 yards into the woods now. Now, just as we're remarking how big it is, we see a dead animal about 10 yards away from the property line. Walking up to examine it, we see that it's a goat that's had its head cut off, clearly done by a human. Then we see a severed goat head a little further away. Now the really creepy part to this is that it's not the same goat. There's two separate ones, and clearly due to the decay, it's been multiple days apart. Now if we weren't armed, it would have been way scarier, but it's still creepy because I fear humans more than anything in the woods now. Now I say this was out in the country, but it's in South Carolina, so there's really not crazy expanses of wilderness, being an East Coast state that's pretty much all settled by people. The thing that gets me now is that there was a serial killer cult not too long ago around the time we were there, and apparently he started on animals too. This happened just over 2 years ago, at the end of my first year of university. I'm female, and at the time was 21. My university's in a very large city, and I was living in university accommodation, a short walk from the main campus. My flatmates had all finished their exams and gone home for the summer, so I was alone in my flat. I was pretty stressed because I was in the middle of my first round of university exams and decided that it wouldn't be prudent to waste my precious study time cooking, so I ordered pizza. It was about 8:30 in the evening when my pizza arrived, so it was on the verge of getting dark. My block of flats had a keycard entry system, so the pizza delivery guy couldn't come right into my door. I saw his car pull up outside, and I go down to get my pizza. The delivery guy stepped out of his car as I walk over. Now he's tall, stocky, and looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, and hands me the pizza. I say thanks, making my way out. However, he had other ideas, saying, "You're very pretty." I don't know how to respond, so I said thanks again. Then he said, "Are you home alone?" This set off my creep alarm straight away. I say no, I'm not. However, my order was clearly meant for one person, and I was in a largely deserted block of flats at the very end of the school year, so he very easily deduced that I was actually lying. I was thoroughly creeped out by this point, so I turned around to walk back to the door. As I walk away, he wolf whistled after me saying, "Wow, you look good." As I walk up the steps, he continued to whistle and whoop and generally be inappropriate. Needless to say, I close the door and lock them as quick as I can, then moving on to my bedroom. Had this happened to me more recently, I would have called the pizza place right away to report the incident. At the time though, I wasn't in the best mindset, so I ate my pizza and focused on my exams. The next few days passed without incident, and I finished my exams and went back to my parents' house for the summer. When I arrived home, I decided that I ought to call the pizza place to report this. I did, and a young woman answered the phone, sounding horrified when I explained the situation. Apparently this guy was a total creep and had done so before and actually got kicked out for it. To set the scene, I live on the outskirts of a town at the end of a terraced house, and there are lots of houses in my area, in front and beyond. I was home alone, My boyfriend was over his friends. At this time, we didn't really lock the front door. If one of us was in the house, now I do. Nothing really happened when we lived there. We had 3 decent sized dogs that were pretty savage when they had to be, and we were a bit naive. And to be fair, I had recently moved in here with my boyfriend, and before I lived in a small village. So I was sat there in my pyjamas, watching TV with all the dogs next to me when the door knocks. It was about 10 PM, and I'm in my pyjamas, so I'm a bit annoyed. I got the dogs off me and walk out to the living room and pull the living room door closed, keeping the dogs in. Bear in mind, this all took place within 10 seconds, and as I approach the door, it swings open and this man that I've never seen before storms in, getting right in my face. I'm literally frozen in shock. The man says, "Who do you think you are?" And I'm in silence. "You think you can run around here and do what you want, causing trouble? You don't care. You think I'm a muppet. I saw you and your little friends running back into this house." I say, "I'm literally stood here in my pyjamas. I haven't been outside." "Yeah, okay, you think I was born yesterday?" And he literally begins screaming. He stares at me for what feels like forever, probably a couple of seconds, then quickly sprinting out, slamming the door shut. I was stood there shaking for seconds before I start to get mad when I realise what's happened. I lock the door and ring up my boyfriend straight away, who gets home in about a minute flat. But the group was nowhere to be seen. We didn't call the police. I didn't want to cause any more commotion. Now it's been 7 years since that happened, and I've not bumped into this person since, or the others with him outside. I again thank God I haven't, and always keep the door locked now. This took place when I was 12. I live in a suburban neighbourhood. Our house is beside railway tracks, so because of this, teenagers will walk along the tracks at night and climb over the railings into backyards. Most of the time they're only playing around or exploring, so there's no trouble with them. But sometimes there's more malicious people coming off the tracks. I was home alone when this took place. It's about 20 past 1, and it was very dark outside. I was watching TV in my room. I heard my house phone ring, but I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't bothered to answer it. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, I went to go answer it, just in case it was urgent, as it was 1 AM. When I picked up the phone and said hello, I had no answer. I say hello again, so I hung up. I think, it's probably just a stupid scam call. When I was back settled in my room and watching TV, I heard a rattling sound from outside. I hear it again, so I look out my window thinking it was probably just teenagers trying to jump over the fence. Except, there wasn't a group of teenagers. It was just a guy trying to get over the fence, torch in mouth. I knew this was shady, but I don't know what to do. I didn't call the police, I just watch him. The man finally gets over the fence. I couldn't see his face, but he was pointing his flashlight at various things in my yard. Everything valuable, such as bikes. They were keeping away in a locked shed, so I knew he would just get bored and walk away. But he didn't. He hung around in the garden for a couple of minutes and then went towards the kitchen door. From my bedroom, I could hear the handle of the back door being messed with. My heart sunk as I remembered that I left my phone in the kitchen, and that's the only way I can call the police. I then heard him bang his fist on the door loudly, but it stops just as suddenly as it starts. I look out my window and hear him scream, and watch him jump back over the fence, turning off the flashlight, disappearing into the abyss of darkness. I'm not quite sure what happened that day, but from that point on, I brought my phone with me everywhere I went. So my husband is in the military. We have generally lived on bases every station we've been to because the surrounding towns can be very crime ridden and sketchy, with my husband mostly on overtime security. I work from home due to us moving so often, so one afternoon I was taking a break, had made a bite and was snuggling up on the couch with my dog. That's when I heard the sliding glass door open. It was so non-clenched that I think it's my husband. I saw my cat run from the kitchen, and a shadow standing near, not entering. I thought that maybe he's come back, so I call out for him and say, "What are you doing home? You forget something?" And there's no answer. This is when I get this eerie feeling. After I ask what he's doing here, I saw the shadow move and heard the click of the sliding door lock. From there, he walked to the laundry room and shut the door. I've still got no response. Sitting on my couch, scared out of my mind, I call out to my husband, hoping he's near his phone. I don't hear a ring, but he answers. I ask him why he came home, and all he says is, "Grab your dog, get in the car now." After getting off the phone, I grab the dog and sprint to it. From there I call the MP. Waiting for them was probably the longest 20 minutes of my life. When they got there, they clear the house and find no one. They asked me to take a statement, and even though they're baffled, they do their best to help. The thing is, we're still on that base. I'm petrified that he's gonna return. This happened in the early thousands, and I was around 12 years old. My dad had passed away about 2 years before leaving my mum, sister and myself. To help me cope with my father's passing, my mum took me to the animal shelter to pick out a dog, since a large dog was something I always wanted. In one of the cages was a small shepherd/husky huddled in the corner that I fell in love with. When the incident happened, he was about 190 pounds and my best friend. Now when the incident occurred, my mum worked on nights and my older sister was taking advantage that my mum wasn't home and would constantly leave me alone. I didn't mind though, because then she couldn't boss me around, since when she was home she would try to be mum, telling me what to do and when to go to bed. We lived in a small middle class suburban area with a low crime rate. It was so low that I wasn't scared to be home alone. I was sitting in the living room playing video games and got up, heading to the kitchen to grab a drink. In the kitchen, I had a clear view through the back door and could see the garage open. Thinking that I just left it open after putting my bike away, I head out to the door to close it. My dog is sleeping in the basement since he liked to lay on the cool floor during the summers. I step out to the door and make it about 5 feet from it when I notice a darkness crouching shadow moving in the garage. I froze, trying to get my eyes to adjust to the darkness. It finally hit me when I saw the figure stand up and turn towards me. I was terrified and felt like I had been glued to the spot. I knew that this person could see me since the back porch lights on. At that moment, the figure starts running towards me. I was too scared to move and let out a yelp, then a scream. But that was all it took for my dog to hear, and the next thing I knew, he was behind me snarling and growling. I can make out it was a man, but no features when he now froze seeing this 90-pound beast behind me. He turned and ran, straight towards the back fence. My dog is in close pursuit. The guy made it to the fence, and since it was only 4 feet, he hopped over before the dog got him. After he got away, my dog came running back to me, and we went inside where I barricaded the doors. I don't know why I didn't call the cops and never told my mum or sister what happened. One thing that bothered me was that he had to have known I was inside since the lights are on and the blinds are open. So that's why the risk to hit a house when somebody was clearly home. The next morning after my mum was home, I went outside to finally close the garage and noticed that he had been going through my dad's toolbox. I locked up the garage and never told anyone about what happened. I then walked my dog to McDonald's and got him a burger and ice cream cone for being my hero. Okay, so this just happened last night, and it's just kept me awake all night and I can't stop thinking about it, so please let me share it. Let me just explain the setup, what's going on. So we have only been living here for a little over 3 months, and my window is the only window out of the entire house that has a view of the backyard, and it's also right next to our very squeaky back door, meaning I always hear when someone comes in and out. Okay, so now to my story. So my family went out to run errands last night, leaving me home alone trying to catch up on my classes, because you know how college life is. Well, it was all going well for the first hour, until I hear the back gate open and shut. At first I think, oh, they must be back, thinking my family's there, but then I thought again that it probably isn't them. I remember we have a front door, and there's no reason for them to come through the back. So I sit still as long as I possibly can and listen. I start to hear the sound of crunching leaves as though someone's stepping on them, but I can also hear that they're now trying to move slowly. At this point, they're right under my window. I know this because we have a couch located right underneath it, and I hear someone actually sit on it and let out a quick grunt, which also let me know that it's a man who's doing this. I'm feeling extremely paranoid now. At this point, I'm completely freaking out, not even being able to move at all because there's literally someone sitting under my window, and I sit there motionless for like 2 minutes until I start to hear it. Tap, tap, tap. He's tapping on the window. They start out like light little taps. With each set of taps he adds more weight. I feel my eyes growing wider and wider, and immediately I feel like I'm gonna pass out, and still I can't move. It's like I'm paralyzed with fear. It still keeps on going, tap tap tap, until finally I manage to snap out of it. Quickly grabbing some shorts and a tank top, I grab my keys and run out of the front door into a 30-degree weather night, which in my defense was definitely not the smartest thing to do, as who knows if he was alone or if he had more people waiting out the front to catch me. I don't know, I didn't care though. I hop into my car and drove off, parked at Walmart nearby, and sit there in shock, not even believing what's happened. I then finally reach for my phone and see my hands are shaking really bad, but I managed to call my parents. As soon as I hear my dad's voice, I burst out crying. I wasn't even able to tell him what had happened. I just could not calm down. Even 5 minutes later, I was still crying, but eventually managed to tell them what happened when they arrived. I was terrified to go back and even waited in the car until my dad came back from the yard after inspecting it and said whoever was there is gone. We also debated about calling the police, but I honestly didn't think anything could have been done out of it since I didn't even have a face to give a report to. I'm still terrified that they're gonna come back, and I don't feel safe whenever I'm left in the house all alone. I've been trying to distract myself all day, but now I'm just too shaken up to even enjoy my day. I just hope I can forget about the whole incident. It's the summer of '95. I was 11, sleeping home around 10 to 11 AM while my parents were at work. I get woken up by the doorbell, so I instinctively hurry up and down the corridor. But before I rush to open the door as I normally would, I remembered that many times my mum scolded me for opening the door without asking who is it first, or looking through the spy hole to make sure it's safe to open. Especially after some previous creepy experiences have already taken place by now. I say who is it, but all I hear is some unintelligible mumble. So I brought a chair, stepped on it to look through the hole. We live in an apartment building, and on the right of our door was the elevator, and then the staircase. Since the staircase windows were on the far left corner, there was not enough natural light to help me see who it is. I just saw a male with some colourful t-shirts standing outside. I repeat the question, and then strain to hear the answer. He said he was looking for my mother's maiden surname, and I said she's at work. To give you some context, both of my parents are doctors. I don't know if that sounds weird for people in the US or the rest of the Western world, but in Eastern Europe, in the 19s, it wasn't uncommon for grateful patients to sometimes stop by wanting to give thanks by bringing fresh fruit or vegetables, etc. So the man said he was bringing something for my mum, except in the murky light, I could see his hands were empty. I asked where it is, and he said, "The package? That's at the stairs." At this point, I'm starting to get this uneasy feeling that something's not right. So I decide to be cautious and lie to him, saying that I don't have keys. I said my parents are at work and they've told me not to open the door to strangers. So when they come back, they'll help him. He started to get agitated and said he can't wait that long, and then says that he is actually bringing meat, so it's gonna get spoiled. I start to hesitate because I'm thinking, what if he's telling the truth? Do I get in trouble? But then I look through the spy hole again and see his hair. This means that his ears pressed against the door listening in. That spooks me and I say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you, please go away and come back later when I'm not alone." He once again says that he does not have time to go back and forth, so offers to leave and says he'll leave with the package at the stairs. So when he's gone, I'm not afraid to open the door and get it. Now this terrifies me, but I remain quiet and intently observe him as he goes down the stairs and makes noises of climbing down. And then I freeze, because in the silence that ensued, I was just about to really open the door and check when I saw part of the freaking t-shirt sleeve above the corner of the stairs. He's hiding there, probably thinking that I know he's gone. What was he gonna do? Pounce on me, break in, or worse? I get so scared that I just froze, and I kept on watching, standing on the chair behind the door. And finally, after what felt like hours, I hear him actually descending the stairs. I didn't open the door. I called my mum's hospital, but I can't get through. Great. They both got worried, but proud at the same time I did the right thing. A few hours later, I and all the kids from the building are at the little square playground area in front of it. It was buzzing with kids running around, with grandpas etc, so it's safe. My best friend Nina and I are sitting on one of the benches when suddenly a strange man approaches us and stands next to the bench, saying, "Are you my name?" And I hesitantly confirm it, although my heart starts to beat faster as I recognize the voice. It's the same man from the morning. This time, I'm not alone. So I instinctively press myself closer to Nina when he says, "Well, I'm bringing something for my father's name, but it's in the car." And I parked around the street. Could you come and help me? Encouraged by my friend's presence and all the people around, I say to him that my dad is actually home, so if he waits there, I'll go and get him, and he can bring him whatever he wants from the car, as I'm little and can't carry heavy stuff. The moment I said that, the guy got quiet and quickly starts walking away, borderline running. My friend, who already knew about what was happening in the morning, and I ran to my apartment. I told my dad. He gets up to go and chase the guy, but of course, there's no trace of him. My dad starts asking away if anyone's had any sign of this, but unfortunately no one seems to. Well, except for one grandma, an old lady living alone on the first floor, who says that a guy approached her earlier while she's sitting on the balcony, asking about our family, then tried to ask for money to pay for the meat he was bringing. As he told her that my parents had purchased it for him, she told him that he has no money, but stupidly gave away all the information. Now, we never heard anything about the guy again, thank God, but those questions are puzzling me. What did he want? How did he get my mum's name, but then said he was bringing something for my dad? Was he only focused on abducting me? I'm just glad I never had to find out. Okay, I haven't really thought about this in a long time. I think I tried to downplay what could have happened because it's easier than accepting the scary reality. So with that out of the way, here's my experience. I was about 13, so it was a good 5 years ago or so. I was at my friend's house, where I don't think I was supposed to be, and we're hanging out. My friend is 2 years younger than me, but we grew up together. So for the most part, everything's normal, until there's a knock on the next door. Now we're pretty sure that it can't be anyone normal. Now we're at her home alone, and we're definitely not expecting anyone. Now I'm a pretty fearless person for the most part, who has no regard for her own safety, but a strong regard for the safety of others. I walked to the door and peered through the curtains. Past the door, there's a man in his late 30s who was standing with a clipboard. His car wasn't in the driveway, but on the street by the house, I think. No, scratch that. I know he saw me because he began to speak. "I'm here to fix your cable." My friend on the stairs has had people come down to do things before, but her parents always told her that it's gonna happen in advance. Her face looks confused and utterly terrified. She's not the bravest, but I did have a bad gut feeling. So by now I think, okay, don't open the door and he's gonna leave. A rational idea, right? Well, at this point, the man kept knocking. The knocking turns to banging. He must have been kicking the door too, because the sound was so loud and violent that I thought the frickin' door was gonna break. She lived on such a busy street, so I'm incredibly unsure how none of her neighbours knew that she is home alone at that time or heard the commotion. Of course, we panic, but I knew I had to take control of the situation. My friend's in no state to move, let alone take the lead. I was 13 though, so I was horrified out of my mind. Eventually, I snuck around to the kitchen grabbing a knife. I checked the back door and went to my friend who was sat on the stairs. The stairs are between each door, but have walls that go down each side so out of sight. When I got back to the stairs, the knocking stopped. My heartbeat seemed to have stopped too, because it sounded like the world became empty. The front doorknob began to turn as he tries to open the door, which is followed by more silence. After maybe 15 seconds, I heard something that I was definitely not happy to hear. "I know you're in there." Now you see. Now if I was an adult, there's no way the man would have said something like that, right? His tone was that of a crazy man, and it left me feeling as though every bone in my body suddenly turned to jelly. Either way, we sat very still. A couple of minutes passed and we thought we were in the clear. That's when I heard the gentle pulling, followed by loud banging on the backyard glass doors. At this point, I grabbed my friend and bring her upstairs. I grab the phone and we go to her mum's room, getting into the closet. I call the police, feeling physically ill, and talk to the lady on the line. She questions us, and my friend has started crying. I answer her questions and she tells me that someone's coming. We have to wait on the line. I felt like puking but kept incredibly calm to ensure that my friend doesn't fall into a panic attack. She's known to get worked up easily, and I couldn't keep her calm. Eventually the banging stops, and I begin to breathe again. "And you still hear him?" I say no. She tells me that I should check to see if he's still there, but says be quiet and careful. I slowly climb down the stairs and peek at the back door. No one's out there. I walk to the front and step into the room with a window and basically crawl to it. When I peek my head over, I see the man sitting on the stairs outside on his phone. I mean, this just sends me into a frenzy, so I respond in panic that he is. She tells me to go back and hide. The police are close. Eventually, after a long time, there's banging on the door again. This time it ends quickly. A nice lady officer calls to us from outside saying we can come out. We go downstairs and see a male officer talking to him while the woman confronts us. Apparently, the man works for a cable company and was informed to go back if no one was home and let himself in. I think anyone can see the flaw in his alibi, but he had a clipboard that had God knows what on it. The police check and let him out. The woman told us she believes us and not him, that he's actually weird and got away by the grace of God. I hate to think about what could have happened if the man got let in. I'm unsure if this even comes off as horrifying as it felt, but maybe the visual image of the man smiling at the back door that's burned into my memory is why it's frightening to think about still. Either way, I'm just so glad that we managed to get out of there safely. In 2014, when I was home alone, my then boyfriend, now husband, was at work, as I happened to have a very rare day off work. I was watching the Golden Girls as I snuggled around our two cats relaxed. I remembered feeling a strange, dreadful feeling. I sat up from the couch and noticed that there's a man with shaggy and greasy long hair. What in the hell? He seemed to make eye contact even though he was roughly 2 blocks away. Then suddenly broke into a sprint. I felt this moment in every inch of my body. I rushed into the front porch and locked the screen door before rushing back into the house and locking the main door leading into the house. He was suddenly at the side of our home, punching and kicking the side window of our home as he screams inaudible screams. Either that, or he wasn't opening his mouth enough to make sounds. I don't know which is more terrifying. I was shocked as I stared at him. Suddenly, he lunged off to the side and I realised that the side door might have also been unlocked. I ran to our side door and caught it right as I saw a face appear in the tiny window. I began to cry as I locked it before running into our spare bedroom. I whip out my cell phone, dialing 911 as I cry and try and explain the issue. For some reason, the story in my memory skips to my upstairs neighbour calling me about 5 minutes later. He says, "Are you okay?" I say, "I think I am." He began telling me what happens after I hid. Apparently, the man had run into his apartment and knocked calmly. So he answered. He had no way of knowing that the person at his door was not of sound mind, and I had not thought to warn him. He opened his door, leaving only a tiny screen between him and the man. He asked the man if everything's okay, to which the man begins screaming, "They're trying to kill me, help." He was shocked and backed up saying, "Please step back. I will call the police." By then, I'm downstairs dialing already. The man punched his door and ran downstairs, kicking and punching his car in the driveway as he screams about being chased and on the verge of being murdered. He pulled the car doors and punches at the windows as he screamed, and I begged the police to arrive faster. The police finally show up as the man was still fighting the neighbour's car. They had brought along an ambulance and took him away promptly, strapped to the back of a stretcher and a straitjacket. This happened to me last Tuesday, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll start this story by saying that I'm a 30-year-old female who lives with my fiance and our 2 dogs. I have 2 huskies. My huskies are not guard dogs, but they can be good when they need to be. So anyway, it's 8 PM, dark out, and I'm home alone. My fiance had a hockey game. I'm in the bathroom with the door closed and the blow dryer going, so I can't really hear anything around me. That is, until I hear one of the dogs howl. I stop and listen, thinking that the dogs are fighting again. Then I hear the faintest knock and the dogs start going crazy, barking, howling, and jumping into the bay window. I think they're actually going to break it. I'm thinking, why are the dogs going crazy like that? Is it a skunk or something? And I look out my bedroom window as it was the closest view I had to the front door. Lo and behold, there's 2 men standing there in black hoodies. They start knocking louder, and this time my 2-year-old husky jumps from the bay window to the front door and starts growling, ramming his body into the door. I'm watching this from my bedroom as the dogs jump into the door. One of the men jumps back, startled, looks at the other guy and walks away. I called my fiance to get home ASAP. I watched them walk away down the road. They weren't selling anything. I was so creeped out. I still am. Thank goodness for my crazy dogs. Scary men at the door? Let's never meet again, please.